Broadcasting across California, California's only statewide political show. You're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michaelson. As voting continues in record numbers across our state, this week we're joined by two of my all-time favorite people. Katie Couric is one of the best-known, best-liked broadcasters in the history of TV. She's now a big star in the digital space as well. You can subscribe to her daily newsletter like I do. It's called Wake Up Call. You can find her videos, podcasts, and more at katiecouric.com. Brian Goldsmith is one of our most frequent guests here. You know him for his work with the Pete Buttigieg campaign, now as a Democratic strategist. But before that, he was the longtime producer for Katie Couric. Brian was by her side for all of the biggest political interviews and co-hosted the Katie Couric podcast. Brian and Katie, welcome to The Issue Is. Great to see you together again.
I'm nervous to be on TV with Katie. I feel like I can't measure up at all.
Yeah, it is like playing basketball with Michael Jordan or LeBron James. But here you go, Brian. I think you can do it. You're the Scottie Pippen of this show today. All right, let's start broadly. Katie, with the idea of where the campaign is at, where do you see things right now from a presidential perspective? And have you ever seen anything like this before in your years of broadcasting?
I truly haven't, Elex. You know, I think it's been such an insane year, and the campaign has been so insane. I do think the tide is turning, but of course it's so wrong in 2016. You just can't take anything for granted. As COVID rates spike in so many states, and as the problem seems to grow worse and worse, juxtaposed with the images of President Trump taking off his mask when he got to the White House, having these huge rallies, I think people are really starting to, in my view, have some buyer's remorse, and some people who supported President Trump in 2016 are wondering if they really do want 4 more years of this kind of chaotic administration with so many mixed messages coming out of it.
I'm a little nervous, frankly. I think fundamentally Biden has an advantage in the race. The public thinks that the country's on the wrong track. On the other hand, I think there's a little irrational exuberance among some Democrats and on Twitter about just the extent of Biden's lead. We're seeing some continued strength behind Donald Trump among his core voter groups.
What we saw were these dueling town halls, first ABC scheduling one with Joe Biden, then NBC scheduling one with Donald Trump. And I know you've been very vocal that you are not appreciative of that decision by NBC. Why?
Well, first, let me say that I have many friends who still work at NBC, and some of my best years in television news took place at NBC. So I have a lot of respect for my colleagues there who have been working so hard and doing a great job. Having said that, however, I was really disappointed by the decision by management to go head-to-head with a town hall featuring former Vice President Biden. I think it was really just craven and wrong, and they should have scheduled it on a night where Vice President Biden was not doing a town hall meeting. And as I said in my tweet, Elex, I think it's really bad for democracy. It just makes the networks look like they are not performing a public service, but they're a purely for-profit enterprise. And of course, that should probably not surprise anyone.
But aren't they for-profit enterprises?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but you would think that there are some instances where educating the American electorate and letting them ask a presidential candidate questions that they might carve that out. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And a girl can dream, right? But I don't think that's part of the equation at this point.
You know, Katie, while you were at NBC, you actually interviewed Donald Trump a lot because he was at The Apprentice then. You even dressed like him for Halloween one year. I know you went to his wedding. I'm curious, what is Donald Trump like behind the scenes? What was it like covering Donald Trump?
Well, you know, I think that in New York, people sort of, didn't take him too seriously. You know, he was responsible for a very successful television show on NBC. I think he learned how to, perform for the cameras. thanks to his years on The Apprentice. You know, I have to say, Donald Trump had been very nice to me through the years. He, came to my colon cancer benefits. It was to both of our advantages because I was anchoring the Today Show and he was getting publicity on the Today Show. So there was some kind of slightly transactional element to it. But he was really actually, quite nice to me on several occasions. And, I had hopes that the presidency would maybe bring out the best in him, and that he would come through and actually step up in a way. And I think, unfortunately, it's kind of brought out the worst in him.
Brian, you and Katie both covered Joe Biden together during several interviews in different roles. I'm wondering what he was like behind the scenes.
We did a series at CBS called Primary Questions. Biden was very warm and gregarious and couldn't have been an easier interview. And I think we both thought very fondly of him. At the same time, we thought, he probably doesn't have a shot to actually win this thing.
And then he ends up, of course, becoming the vice presidential nominee. He ends up in a debate with the other vice presidential nominee, who, of course, that was the interview you guys were best known for, the most famous political interview probably in recent American history, your interview with Sarah Palin. Let's take a look at some of that.
What newspapers and magazines did you regularly read before you were tapped for this to stay informed and to understand the world?
I've read most of them, again, with a great appreciation for the press, for the media.
Like what one specifically? I'm curious that you...
all of them, any of them.
I just thought it was strange that she didn't answer the question because that morning, as Brian will tell us, we saw her reading the New York Times on the campaign plane. And the fact that she didn't say, gosh, I read primarily Alaska publications, because first and foremost, my responsibility is to the people in my state. So I think it was just odd that she couldn't come up with a better answer. And I still don't know why she didn't.
And it just goes to show why Katie, and I really mean this, is not just the best interviewer in broadcasting today. I really think she's the best interviewer in the history of television broadcasting, because she has this amazing ability to come up with the question, the moment that will really reveal something new and fresh and important for viewers.
Before we go, Brian is a regular around here, and I want you to give you a chance to inflate his ego even more than it already is. So he's talked about what he loves about you. What is it that you love so much about Brian?
I always tell the story about, I don't know if you know this, Elex, but when Brian was in high school, he got grounded for sneaking out of his room to watch C-SPAN. So that's the kind of super nerd that Brian is. But first of all, he's the most generous colleague I've ever worked with. He is so smart. I would call him and get his perspective on almost any issue. Also, he's just an incredibly nice person and a great human being. So I don't know if that's enough for your ego, Brian, but it's all genuine. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
I just sat through my own eulogy or something. Katie, that was way too generous, as always. Thank you very much. And I know you.
Okay. But he's really funny too, right, Elex?
Yes, yeah. And I got to say, while we're doing these over-the-top tributes, I have to say, as a kid, Katie, I have a distinct memory of being about 9 years old, watching the Today Show and thinking, that is what I want to do with my life. You describe this as a little stalkerish, but when I came on with you. But this is me coming to the Today Show and meeting you as a kid. And of all broadcasters, I think I've sort of most looked up to your interview style, your ability to make people feel comfortable and to be real. So I have so much appreciation for you. And to have you on this show is such like a momentous and like an emotional thing for me. So thank you for all that you've done.
Well, thank you. And by the way, I like your red tropical shirt that you wore on the Today Show. I think you're doing a terrific job. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you.
Well, we always like to play music on this show. So because you two are coming back together on this show for the first time in a long time, I picked out this song for you.
And it feels so good.
This is the chance to dance it out, Katie. Katie Couric, Brian Goldsmith, reunited. Great to see you guys together. Special congressional debate when we come back. Voting is now underway in California with several close congressional races in the spotlight. This week, we're focusing on the 4th district, which you can see here on this map. But the issues here are issues in every congressional district in our state. Joining us for an Issue Is debate, Republican Congressman Tom McClintock, his Democratic challenger Brynne Kennedy. Welcome to you both. Good to have you here. Before we get to the issues, each of you have a 1-minute opening statement by a coin toss. Ms. Kennedy, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Congressman. I'm not a politician. I'm a businesswoman who built a company to help people work on the go and from home, all things we're dealing with now. I grew up in a working class military family with 2 parents who had cancer, one with health care, one without. And like all of us, I am fed up with Washington and career politicians who are divisive and out of touch, like Tom McClintock here. I mean, look at where we are. Chaos. A COVID crisis that's put people out of work, kept kids from school, and killed our fellow Americans. Wildfires getting worse. Health care, home insurance, and Social Security under threat. I offer a different approach, one that works with Republicans and Democrats to actually solve these problems. Washington isn't working for us, it's failing. And when your business is failing, or your sports team is losing, the first thing you do is you change the people in it. And that is what I offer. Change, new ideas, new energy to fight for the things that matter. But most importantly, the opportunity to come together as a community and get things back to normal.
Thank you very much. Congressman, to you. 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Alex. It's hard to believe that just 8 months ago, we were enjoying the greatest economic expansion in our lifetimes, lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. You know, in Trump's first 3 years in office, average wages grew 5 times faster than they had in Obama's 8 years combined. And that wasn't by accident. It was because a Republican administration and Congress enacted the largest combined tax and regulatory relief in our nation's history. Now, my fight for these reforms is reflected in the fact that Citizens Against Government Waste, the National Taxpayers Union, and the National Federation of Independent Business have consistently rated me one of the best votes in Congress, and in many years, the very best vote in Congress. Back in March, I warned the lockdowns were insane and would do far more harm than good. Now the World Health Organization agrees. Ending the lockdowns and restoring the economy is going to be job one for the new Congress, and I'm looking forward to getting our country back to the prosperity that freedom produces.
All right, and to that point, let's go to question number 1. Each of you are going to get 1 minute to respond, then a 30-second rebuttal. Here it is. You just talked about it, Congressman. Let's start with you. In the midst of this pandemic, how do we safely reopen California and get people back to work?
Well, Alex, the lockdowns didn't save lives, they cost lives. We can see that plainly when we look at the difference between states and countries that kept their schools and their shops open and those who ordered their citizens into home detention. Overall, COVID mortality under lockdowns has been much higher, and so has been the economic damage. Now, as I said back on the House floor in March, there is no substitute for immediately reopening our economy, restoring our constitutional rights, and holding accountable the politicians who caused this disaster. Coming out of this self-destructive panic, maintaining low tax, low regulatory policies is going to be absolutely crucial. So far, the United States has bounced back faster than most other countries, and we have to build on the same policies that produced the economic expansion that we enjoyed less than 8 months ago.
Ms. Kennedy, my guess is you have a different view.
Well, let's look at where we are. We have 4% of the world's population and 20% of the deaths. 1 in 5 small businesses have failed and millions are out of work. It's Washington that can't get this done. You know, we know what we need to do to reopen our economy and keep it opened. We need to follow public health guidelines. We need to get help to our businesses, our schools, and the American people. And we need to innovate in how we work, something I've been doing for years in the private sector. In fact, my experience is made for this moment. My opponent has a different view. He has actually undermined reopening our economy and keeping it opened. He rejects science and he rejects experts. He was the only California congressman to vote against COVID aid for us. And still, right now, he calls masks useless. So I actually have a question for my opponent. And that is, when the experts tell us that simply wearing a mask could save 100,000 American lives, why do you call them useless?
Congressman, you got 30 seconds to respond.
I don't understand why Brynne can't see now, at least in hindsight, that Sweden got it right and we got it wrong. Sweden kept their shops open. They kept their schools open. They did not mandate masks. The COVID mortality is now much lower in Sweden than it has been in the United States. It's been virtually over there for the past 4 months. They've been recording less than one death a day in the entire country. That is the policy that I advocated for our country from the beginning. And I don't understand why Brynne can't grasp that experience that we've already established.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kennedy, 30 seconds to you.
You know, Alex, it's just wrong. And the people listening aren't dumb. I, for one, trust Dr. Fauci a heck of a lot more than Dr. McClintock over here. If we listen to what he's advocating for, we would lose more Americans than we did on the battlefields of World War II. We know what we need to do to reopen the economy and keep it open. We need to follow public health guidelines. We need to get help to our communities, and we need to innovate in how we work. I'm the only candidate in this race who will work with Republicans, Democrats, state and local leaders to make that happen.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there on that issue. But up next, we discuss California's fires. And where do we go from here on that? Stay with us. More of The Issue Is after this. More than 4 million acres have burned around California this year. That issue at the center of our special congressional debate. Joining us once again, Republican Congressman Tom McClintock and his Democratic challenger in District 4, Brynne Kennedy. Each of you will get 1 minute for this question. Ms. Kennedy, we start with you. Here it is. In this record fire season, what can you do, and what can the federal government do to alleviate the pain that so many people in this district are feeling?
You know, Alex, in 2014, people started losing their home insurance in our district in Tuolumne County. This year, we've had more fires than ever burning on federal land. And just this week, people are sitting in the dark again with more power outages. All this has gotten worse on McClintock here's watch because he rejects science and he goes it alone, my way or the highway. Worse, he says one thing and votes the other way. Politician doublespeak. He voted to shut down the government and stop forest thinning projects. He voted against the bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act to maintain our federal forests. And he voted to increase taxes for victims of wildfires. Like COVID, we know what we need to do. We need to aggressively manage our forests. We need to haul the insurance executives in front of Congress. And we need to invest in our infrastructure so our power grid is fit for today. I'm the only candidate in this race who will work with Republicans and Democrats to actually solve this problem, because unlike my opponent, I live in our district and I face them every day.
Congressman, 1 minute to you.
Well, Brynne's already been called out for misrepresenting my record. I'm sorry she continues to do so. I've focused my work on the House Natural Resources Committee to restore active forest management to our national forests. Excess timber is going to come out of a forest in only two ways. We're either going to carry it out or it will burn out. For decades, we carried it out through federal timber auctions. That money went back into our local communities, and we had both healthy forests and a thriving local economy. In the 1970s, environmental laws made active forest management endlessly time-consuming and ultimately cost-prohibitive. Timber harvests dropped by 80%, and acreage destroyed by fire has increased proportionally. My legislation to streamline these regulations became law as part of the WIN Act. It's taken forest management permitting from 4 years down to just 4 months, and it's now being used for the biggest forest management plan in the history of the Tahoe Basin. And now I'm fighting to get the same authority for all of our federal lands.
What's your response to that, Ms. Kennedy? Forest management, good idea?
Well, Top's been saying this for 40 years, but nothing gets done. The forests are still mismanaged. The fires are getting worse. We're still sitting in the dark, and people are still losing their home insurance. More and more of them. Worse, he shows up here and lectures us and then votes completely differently. I'm the only candidate in this race who will work with Republicans, Democrats, state and local leaders to actually solve these issues. It's why in the Tahoe Basin that he speaks of, Almost all of the local elected officials have endorsed me, not him. In fact, 80 nonpartisan elected officials in our community have endorsed me.
Yeah, that was 30 seconds. Congressman, your 30 seconds.
I think the record speaks for itself. The only major forest management reforms that we've gotten through, it was my legislation signed into law as part of the WIN Act. It was signed, by the way, by President Obama. It passed on bipartisan majorities in both houses. And now is it going to be of critical importance, since we have now proved the concept in the Tahoe Basin, to get that done nationally. That's what I'm fighting for right now. It's true. It's been a long fight. When I began warning about our bad forest management, I was accused of being the embodiment of the Lorax that wanted to clear-cut our forests. Now, finally, people are coming around to the understanding that we are killing our forests by benign neglect.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much. We end really quickly with some fun. This is a game we play called Personal Issues. We're going to put 30 seconds up on the clock and give each of you a chance to respond. We'll go back and forth on these. Congressman, let's start with you. What's your favorite TV show?
Dateline.
Okay. Ms. Kennedy.
Schitt's Creek.
Favorite meal, Congressman?
Meatloaf.
Ms. Kennedy.
Or McDonald's hamburgers. They do a good job.
Favorite meal?
I'm a very, very big proponent of eating salad that is placer grown locally where I live in Placer County.
Okay, and real quickly, favorite thing about your opponent, Congressman?
Her tenacity.
Very nice. Ms. Kennedy?
He has a very nice office.
Okay. And a very nice Ronald Reagan poster behind as well. Thank you both for the time. We appreciate it. And a civil exchange of ideas, which is what this show is all about and what this state should be all about as well. Remember, it's time to vote. Thanks to you both. We'll wrap things up when we come back. Next week, internet phenoms Brian Tyler Cohen on the left, Tomi Lahren on the right will debate right here. And as we say goodbye, a reminder to vote and to log on to our website for more about the issues, theissueisshow.com. See you next time.